Hi, this is Nick from Digital Wood Studios, and in this video what we're going to be doing is walking through the disassembly process in order to replace a variety of different components and make some of the upgrades that we provide on our shop. Now, in this video I'm going to be showing the 1090 model of the BowFlex Select Tech adjustable dumbbell. However, this disassembly process applies to the 1090 model, the 1090i, which is the international version of the 1090, as well as the 552 Series 1, as well and the 552 Series 2, which are the 50-pound dumbbells. So this process will apply to all of those models. So even though you see the 1090 here, if you've got a 552 Series 1 or Series 2, you're good with this video. This will still walk through those same steps. Before we dive into it, you will notice that there are a variety of components that are on my particular dumbbell that might look different than yours. That's okay. These are all parts that we manufacture. So if there's some things that look a little different, I'll be noting those as we walk through it and explaining why and explaining some of those components are because, again, we provide those. So before you jump into it, something to note, it doesn't take a whole lot of tools in order to fully disassemble this dumbbell. The tools that are required are going to be ideally 2 socket wrenches, a 3/4 inch socket or a 19 millimeter. If you have 2 of those, so 2 3/4 or 1 3/4 and 1 19 or 2 19s, that'll be able to allow you to loosen up the 2 nuts that are on the ends of the dumbbell. Alternatively, if you don't have 2 socket wrenches, you can use just an open-ended crescent wrench. It will make it a little bit more challenging just accessing the nut on the side, but totally doable, not an issue if you do not have 2. And then you'll also need a 2 millimeter Allen key, but this is only required if you're going to be taking the plates off on the inside to do a locking pin replacement or a weight guard replacement. If you're not doing either of those, you really won't need this Allen key at all. And then no matter what you're doing on the dumbbell, for the most part, is you're going to need some tape, ideally painter's tape. The main reason I recommend painter's tape is it just doesn't leave any adhesive residue on your dumbbell after the fact. So if you've got it, this is the best. If you don't, you've just got regular tape, it's fine. You just might have to do a little bit of cleaning afterwards, depending on what tape you're using. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into it. Now, before you do any disassembly using any of your tools, we're going to start out with the painter's tape, and I will explain why and how here in a moment. So what you're going to want to do is you're actually going to take your dumbbell and place it upward like this. And I'll probably fast forward through some of these parts so you don't have to watch the whole thing. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be compressing or keeping this plastic plate and this metal plate compressed to one another. There's springs, 2 springs that sit between this plate and this plastic housing here, as well as a ball bearing. And if these 2 become loose when you unscrew this, those springs and ball bearings will fall out, they'll start rolling, fall on the ground, and you'll be searching around for them, and that's not fun. So what we do with this tape is we're basically going to keep these 2 in contact, keep those springs compressed, and just prevent them from rolling around and getting lost. It just makes life a lot easier. It'll make the whole process go much quicker. So highly recommend this step that we're going to walk through before doing any disassembly. So all we're going to do here is take a bit of tape, and you're going to want to just kind of slide it up until you start hitting the center post of those discs. Once you kind of touch that, you can back off just a little bit. Set this on the metal plate, make sure you're stuck on there, and then just wrap it around the backside. And just make sure you got it stuck there. And then you can just kind of push those in. I'll flip this around just so you can see the other side here. So that's all we're doing. And then we're going to repeat that process on this side. So we just did the back here. So we've got that side taped. So now you can see those 2 pieces are nice and held together and secured. And then we're going to repeat that exact same process on the opposite side of the dumbbell. All right, so now that's how your dumbbell should look before you start taking anything apart. It doesn't need to be nice and clean, just as long as you got it on there and they're just staying together. So now you can set aside your tape. Won't need that for a bit longer. But once you're at this stage, now you can go ahead and grab your 2 socket wrenches, and you're gonna wanna, let me take one step back actually. So one thing to note, and you'll see on my dumbbells, is I don't have the caps on mine. I disassemble mine pretty regularly for videos, replacement components. This is kind of my prototype dumbbell that I do a lot of testing on. So you'll end up having to remove your cap. For the 1090s, you're gonna have to use a sharp blade, screwdriver, or something to pry the cap up. It's usually adhesive that's sticking to it, so as long as you can get under it, pull it off. The 552s have more of a snap-in cap, but same thing, you're going to need to get a sharp, thin blade of some sort underneath and just slowly work your way around. But once you get those caps off, you'll see the nuts that are exposed on both sides here. So same thing on both sides. And once you do have that exposed, then you can grab your socket wrenches or wrenches and just loosen that up. Now, your dumbbells might be a bit more difficult to disassemble when it comes to loosening these nuts if you don't take yours apart regularly. Some people do have Loctite on theirs that locks the threads. If you do have that, you might need to apply a little bit of heat maybe to the sides with a heat gun or something, but just to kind of allow that thermal expansion and loosen those joints up. But keep in mind, if you do that, just don't apply direct flame. Be careful to apply too much heat to this dial here. It is overmolded rubber, so this can melt. So just be cautious when doing that. Now, something to note is when you're going to disassemble your dumbbell, like I just did, one nut is going to come off and the other one is not, and that's just inherent to the lock nut style that BowFlex uses. One's just going to be stuck on there more, so you can't really predict, I'll say, which is going to come off, but it doesn't matter too much. It might just make things a little bit longer depending on what you're replacing. So you can see here, this side came off. Now, once that's off, all I need to do is basically pull this dial off, and you'll see what's going on back here. So I've got a couple nylon washers that usually rest in here, and a metal washer, and then the nut. So I'm just gonna set these guys aside in that order just to help keep things a bit organized. So now, at this stage in the process, if you were replacing any of these discs, you would be about 95% of the way done here. So if I wanted to replace these discs, it would be as simply as sliding these guys off. You could pop, whichever disc that might be broken on your set off, slide it on. If you are replacing an entire set of 4, you could simply take the set of 4. We typically ship them in this configuration already kind of in a pre-assembled state. There's no need to disassemble them. I'd leave them in this manner and then just slide them right on. And when you do that, something to note is you see these protruded slots. They're different sizes. You have 2 small ones, 1 large one. And that basically allows you to key them into one another. So that way your orientation is always locked. So when you do install it, you can kind of look at this in advance and look at these features here. Apologies if the lighting's not ideal here, but you can see those little cutouts in the metal plate. Those are going to align with these features here, but you could also just do it blind and not even really think about it. And when I say that, you can kind of just push against it, start to rotate, and when you feel it pop in and engage, then you know that right there, then you know you're locked and loaded, and then you can kind of put these all back on. So if you're replacing discs, that's as easy it is, and then you'd start putting things back on like we just did. Now, if you're going to do a handle replacement, at this point you could take off this weight guard assembly, keep this tape on so that way if everything's compressed, you're not losing any components. And then you would simply remove the handle here. Now, if you were doing a handle replacement, at this point you could take your handle, slide it on, and then put all the components back in reverse order. This is our replacement knurled handle. That's an improvement and an upgrade over the BowFlex metal, or metal with the rubber overmolding. It just gives a much better feel. It's more of a standard dumbbell. We have a variety of sizes, and just gives more of a knurled friction, and in my opinion feels much better than the original BowFlex handles. So if you were to do that, you could simply slide this on. Same as the discs in a manner. You can see these locating features here. Now, if you're putting this back in, you can see this gap here. So I'm rotating, and then it pops right in place, and that's how you know you've got it oriented right, and it won't spin any further after that point. So if at this point you were doing these discs, same process, you could keep removing this weight guard assembly here, set it off to the side. I could slide these discs off, replace whatever discs are necessary, slide them on, put your weight guard back on, and so forth. Now, we'll briefly walk through this weight guard assembly. So there's a few components in here that we also provide that you might be replacing. A few of which are the locking pin mechanism, which you can see kind of protruding out here, as well as the ball bearings and springs that are contained within this assembly, and we'll go through that. So at this point, I'm going to actually take this tape off. So if you are replacing these components, springs, ball bearings, locking pin, you're going to need to remove the tape at this point, and that's totally fine. We'll likely have to replace it in a bit anyways, just to keep everything secured after we've put the components back in. And feel free to toss that tape here. I'm not going to use it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and show you what's going on in here. Hopefully get the right lighting. So you can see there's a spring and a ball bearing in there. And then you should be able to see another spring and ball bearing sitting down in this cavity. And what often happens is if your dumbbell's not compressed properly, these will potentially migrate and get lost in these cavities, and you'll feel that your dumbbell's not rotating smoothly. It's not making that clicking sound. And I'll kind of give you a bit of an example as to why. So now when you're replacing any of these components, something to note is you'll be able to lift this plate up pretty well, but getting it out of here, you kind of have to pull in this direction as you're lifting. And quite honestly, it can be a bit of a pain and sometimes isn't even worth fully removing. I've done this enough times at this point that I've learned it's actually easier just to be able to get my fingers in there and do the replacement itself, or do the replacement with this in place. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you on this other assembly here a little bit, mainly because our weight guard, this is a replacement weight guard, and what we've done is we've actually designed more clearance here that allows this plate to be removed far, far easier. So just an example there. So if you are replacing your springs and ball bearings, it's as simple as you take that ball bearing out. Let's see if I can use these washers to keep my ball bearing from rolling around. You take the springs out. Again, if you've got them still located properly. You're also going to want to make sure that this washer stays in place. This can get dislodged. It's kind of got a little bit of a recess, allow it to stay. And then, so you can kind of see I'm able to get in there. So then same thing here. So I've got spring and ball bearings. So now at this point, you can see inside there's no other loose components. Now, if you were doing a lock pin replacement, which typically if you need a lock pin replacement, that means that when you're rotating your dial outside of the actual base with the weights, and your dial is able to freely rotate, which is not intended and not ideal, that means your lock pin is broken and it's not preventing this plate from moving, and this plate is allowed to freely rotate, which means your lock pin is probably broken, the post of it. So in order to replace that lock pin, that's where this hex comes in. So you'll be able to see down in here, there are two captured hex nuts. Hopefully you can see that with the lighting. And they're captured currently, but the moment we start taking these screws and this plate off, those hex nuts are able to freely migrate. So what I typically do is I like to just put my fingers over the top of those, flip it over, take your Allen wrench and unscrew it. Now, something to note, this is a replacement plate that we provide and sell. This is what your standard 1090 is going to look like. It's going to be a metal plate, so just note if it looks different, that's not because you've got something strange going on. It's just an aftermarket product that we provide for those that may have lost their plates, or just want one that is a different color. You want to make your dumbbell assembly look a little more of a color theme you might be going after. So we'll simply remove these. So now you can see here I've got my 2 screws. I'm just going to set that off to the side for now. And now underneath here, you're going to find that this is your lock pin spring. And then this is the lock pin itself. I'm going to let these hex nuts come out here. There we go. So those are the hex nuts that the plate was screwed into. And then this is our lock pin. And this is our replacement lock pin. This is an extremely strong, extremely durable carbon fiber reinforced lock pin. So at this stage, if you were doing this lock pin replacement, you would take your new lock pin. You can see that this lock pin has some geometry to it where you've got a chamfer here, your flat base here, and flat on top. You're always going to want to have that chamfer pointing down, and you can see that the hole is a little bit higher in this cutout, and that's to align with the post here. So all you would do is simply drop your new lock pin in, and then you would take your spring, put your plate back on, and now you can hold that plate in like so. And again, the order of operations here, totally up to you on what makes the most sense. But again, these hex nuts did fall out, so I'm going to put those guys back in like that. You might need to spin them just a little bit to get them to kind of seat in there. You know what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this down. I'm going to put my fingers on those hex nuts like so and reverse this a bit here. All right. So now we've got that in place. So if we put our new lock pin in, for example, start screwing these back in. And I can feel those hex nuts on the backside kind of starting to pull away from my fingers, so I know they're engaging. And once you get them engaged, they won't go anywhere, so you don't need to worry about your fingers holding those hex nuts in place once the screws start pulling them. All right, so now hex nuts are engaged, we're good there. My spring and plate are installed as well as my new lock pin, so I know I'm good. Now, what I'll do next is I'm going to reinstall the springs and ball bearings. First, I'm going to throw this guy in here. So something to keep in mind is as you're doing this process, you're going to want to try and keep this assembly flat, because the moment you start tilting this with those ball bearings just simply rest on top of these springs. So if you start tilting it, those ball bearings are very prone to just falling right out. So again, you've got this hole down in there. Find that. Oop, see, I already lost that spring, so easy enough to tip right out. Try that again. There we go. So I would definitely recommend getting both springs in first, like so. So you can see the 2 springs are in there. Now at this point, I'm going to let this just rest flat. And let's grab our ball bearings. So make sure they don't go taking off on us. So again, this is where keeping this propped up is ideal. Try to get it as high as you can without putting too much stress on it. So now I've got my 2 ball bearings on there. And one thing you're going to want to do is as you're resting this down, you can see all these holes, the center ring of holes. You've got the large ones and then you've got the small ring of holes. You're going to want to locate 2 of those holes right over the top of that ball bearing as you're dropping it down. So you just want to look down and you can kind of hear that little pop sound. Perfect. And I can see there's a ball bearing there and a ball bearing there. And if you line those before dropping it down, it just prevents the potential for you dropping it and then this plate rotating to find those ball bearings and accidentally pushing the ball bearings off the spring. So just a recommendation is all there. So now once I have this in this state, what you're going to want to do is secure it all just like we did before with some tape, just so that way that plate and that assembly does not come apart and we don't have to go through that process once more. As fun as it might be, no need to do it twice. So now you are going to want to push down on this a little bit because there isn't anything compressing it currently like there was when it was assembled. So you just want to push it down gently. Doesn't need a ton of stress, but just enough to keep it into contact. Same thing on the other side. Push this down. When I say push, I'm really just kind of pinching and squeezing here. Now, something to note is as you're doing this, you're going to want to avoid putting tape in this recessed region because that's where your components are going to interface, and you don't want this tape to get in the way or get pinched and then you're leaving tape behind. And then same thing on this side. You can kind of see that I've got some in the way. Just move that out of the way and you'll be good to go. So now let's say I've walked through my spring and ball bearing replacement or my lock pin replacement. This weight assembly or weight guard assembly is good to go. So at this point, we've effectively walked through the replacement of just about every component that we provide, or any replacement component you might need. So now what we're going to do is we're going to walk back through the reassembly process. So at this point, let's get ourselves organized a little bit here. Move some things out of the way for now. So what we'll do is we'll take our dumbbell assembly. We're going to take our weight guard. Something to keep in mind is as you do move this around, this little nylon washer that's sitting in here isn't always the most secure, so you might want to just put your finger in there or something just to keep that from falling down, so that way you don't have to shake this thing to try and get it to come back in. Just enough until you get this pole centered in the weight guard itself. So just a little tip there. Once it's on there, you don't have to worry about it. And now as you slide this on, you're going to want to, again, these features are going to clock into one another. No need to really look and try and align it. Just push it gently against it and rotate, and there you go. You'll feel that kind of pop. And once you do, you won't be able to rotate these relative to one another. And now we're going to take our upgraded handle, pop that guy in there. And again, you're going to want to watch out for any tape because you don't really want to leave tape behind. There we go. All right. And then we're going to take our other weight guard assembly. And now keep in mind, these always want to point and cover the discs. Oftentimes people kind of orient them the wrong way. Just not a big issue if you do. Just a matter of taking it right back off and sliding it on the right way. All right. And then same thing here. Got a little bit of tape that's going to be in the way, and no need to have that. There we go. Okay. So now we'll put our discs on. We're going to slide these in like so. And again, protrusions are going to be pointing this direction, so that way they interface with that metal plate. And then I'm just going to rotate until I hear and feel that engage. There we go. And then I'm going to take my dial. Now, I may have mentioned that we do replace many of these components. So the discs, we provide the weight guards, the springs and ball bearings we spoke about, handle upgrades, the lock pin that we spoke about. We do provide new dials. So just about every component on this dumbbell, with the exception of the plate and the plastic housing here and the steel rod, we don't provide, but we do provide nuts, the washers for the side assembly or for the full assembly. So just about the entire dumbbell we can help you completely repair and get back in working order if necessary. So then once you got that dial on, same thing here, make sure that that's clocked. And then you're going to simply take that nut, start threading that on by hand. Just make sure you're engaged. You don't want to get that cross-threaded or anything. In fact, I think I am a little bit. Let's just get that started again a little better. Sorry if I'm out of camera view here. There we go, that's better. Okay, so now I've got that on, and I'm going to tighten it. And now something that's really critical here is I often get people commenting or reaching out saying, hey, you know, I've done the assembly, it seems to be working, but my dumbbells are not fitting in the base all that well like they were before, or they're not rotating very smoothly. What's going on? And one of the critical things to keep an eye out for is you don't want to over tighten this assembly. I mean, you saw what I just did. I wasn't cranking on it. Just a real light, snug fit. Oftentimes the recommendation I have is just having this nut kind of flush or just sub flush with, or sorry, the rod itself, the threaded rod, flush or sub flush to this nut. Every dumbbell assembly is going to be a little bit different depending on how far this is protruding on this side, but general just recommendation is just snug, not too tight. These are nylon lock nuts, which is going to prevent them from backing out, so there's no major concern of this whole assembly coming loose and falling apart on you during normal use. But if you do squeeze these too hard by tightening them too much, what will happen is you'll actually compress those springs and ball bearings way more than they should be, and that's going to prevent that rotation, because on this metal plate there's little detents, and that's where those ball bearings lock into, and that helps as you're rotating the selector only land on the specific weights. So if you've compressed that too much, you're going to feel a lot more resistance and friction. So if you feel that, just simple as taking your sockets or your wrench and just loosen it up, and just kind of little bit by little bit until you get it to feel just right. And then secondly, make sure everything's seated properly. If you're not seated properly, then yeah, you're going to have gaps in areas that you really shouldn't have and that you don't want. So now at this point, we've reassembled the dumbbell. We are free to remove this here. And you can see I got a little bit of tape. Oh, there we go. I was going to say I might have some tape snagged underneath the handle there. There we go. And now you've got your reassembled dumbbell with all your upgrades and repairs. And yeah, I'm looking good. And at this point, if you've got caps that you want to put on, or replacement caps, again, we do provide custom caps that you can pop in here that are super easy to remove and put back in place. It doesn't have adhesive that starts to get sticky and dirty over time, so we do provide those as well. But yeah, so that's the full replacement. Something to note is when you do reassemble, you might have your numbers offset just based on some changes that we may have made during the process of reassembly. If that happens, not a huge deal. It's as simple as potentially just putting it back on your base and rotating it. Alternatively, it's fairly straightforward. This little pin here is what controls that lock pin that we spoke about. So you can take something like your hex Allen key and push this down, and that'll allow you to rotate this. It'd be a lot easier if I had it on a stable surface, but so yeah. So now I could align those to one another. Again, I didn't quite do it because I couldn't see it, but I could do something as simple as that, or use a flathead, any sort of tool to get those back to, ideally maybe your 10-pound markers where you'd want to be in order to put this back on the base if you've still got all your weights on it. But just something to note there. But yeah, that's the full disassembly process. Again, this covers the 1090, 1090i, 552 Series 1 and Series 2. And yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to us. The best way to contact us is through our Etsy page. We respond usually within a couple hours at most, and hope this video helps you and is clear. And yeah, thanks to those that have made any purchases from us and are using this as a guide to disassemble your dumbbell, and thanks in advance for any potential customers that are seeing this video. Again, hope this was helpful. Thanks again. This is Nick from Digital Wood Studios, and have a great day.